Good morning. Let's go through a proper introduction. We will talk quite a bit about cultural dimensions today, but we're wrapping up. We're finishing the first week of class with these PPTs. So we're looking at East Asian International Management Strategy Culture, the new realities. Today I am finishing week 2, which is just introducing you the idea of management theories and country differences, student differences, technological differences. And we're also going to be talking about the videos, which is week 2, the idea of what is the 2 million minutes, how students differ in each country, and different ways to identify how cultures are different. And next week, we're going to be talking about the war, as I said, the art of war, Sun Tzu, 2,500-year-old management laws or rules or suggestions that have been proven to be the best in history. So you should be aware of Maslow. You should be aware of Herzberg and McGregor. These are examples of how to manage. They're management theories, but they have all been proved wrong. They only apply for people of that same culture and the same values. And then we need to understand the idea of parochial. That's the idea of you're born, you only know one way of doing things. Anybody else is just really, really bad or strange. And then you go to school and you learn a little bit more about cultures, but you don't really understand why they do things differently in a different country, and you become ethnocentric. And ultimately, the idea of your self-reliance is a big problem. You need to understand other people are different and invest your time, invest your energy to try to understand the other people first before you push your culture on other people. But cultures change by various different groups. We can talk about the culture of Samsung and Hyundai. We'll talk about that much more later. So let's get into it. Again, Ulukbek, can you tell me about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in just a few seconds?
They are self-actualization, certain needs, social needs, safety needs, and psychological needs. Right?
Yes. Right. So he has this, but he's wrong because it's made by Western countries, where the Western countries are usually individualistic, looking at their self-interests and the detail-oriented. And so this works for Western countries. But in places like Japan, just being an individual is actually bad. You need to be part of the social group, or physiologically, you are considered an outcast and you might die if you're not part of the good group. So the Maslow's needs changed. So that happened in 1920s. At the same time, they had Hawthorne studies, which identified workers work better when management just shows they're interacting. And so the management just turned on the lights and workers worked better. And then they left them on for a while, and then the management came back and they turned the lights off and the managers worked even better. It was quite interesting. Like I said, in my experience, you pay people a lot and they might work well for a couple of weeks, but then they go back to their natural style. And some people like to work and like to grow things, other people don't. However, it's different by group to group. Herzberg studies, he was saying that you need to understand hygiene and safety, the idea of you have to have reasonable work conditions, safe work conditions, adequate salary and things, and then you can either be satisfied or not satisfied. McGregor was saying either yes or no, X or yes, X or Y. Some employees dislike work, that's the theory X. Some employees are willing to work and prefer more responsibility, that's theory Y. You need to identify who you're working with and how they work. That idea. There's also the equity theory, reinforcement theory, many different theories. Each theory has problems. So you should be developing your specialization to develop some research paper and be just like Abraham Maslow or McGregor and become famous, but realize ultimately whoever you work with, wherever you work with them, there's a high chance they have different cultures and values than you. So make sure you check. What is it that they respond to? This is showing these theories and implications. So we're going to jump through a lot of this, This is just the reality showing how Maslow was just based on North American subjects. Herzberg, the motivation depends heavily on culture. Expectancy theory, the difference in value in each society. Some people value being alone, working alone. Other people value working in groups. So we have different ways to identify culture. You must understand culture. And we identified again parochialism, ethnocentrism. Thomas, can you remember what is SRC? We start with parochialism, we identify ethnocentrism, but the biggest challenge is SRC. Do you remember what that means?
No, I do not.
Okay, SRC stands for your self-reliance criterion, relying on what you think is normal, relying on what you think is normal can be a problem because the other people might have a different normal or different value. So you just doing things based on what you think is good can insult other people or make problems with other people. We started identifying a couple of examples. The idea of you need to understand who you are, who they are. I think we talked a little bit about in Tahiti, there is the executive of a international hotel where the hotel president, for example, he had to buy art for every one of his 500 different rooms. And he went to an artist that had amazing art. And he said, how much does this cost? Well, the one piece was $100. So he said, great, I'm going to buy 500. Can I buy 500 for $50 each? And the artist said, no, are you crazy? It was probably going to be more, if one is $100, any more than one is going to be $500 each. The Western people think that's crazy. You should get a discount. But the Tahitian culture was that the artist likes doing one thing that's new and creative. But if you do it again and again and again, it's not new, it's not fun, it's not creative. It's like you're working in a factory again. It takes the idea of creativity away. So it's torture. You have to pay a lot more. So understand how it's different. We can talk about many examples like that. You are special, but how? Know who you are. Know how to describe people. Do you have a good understanding of how to appreciate differences? Later on today, can Jung-Oh-Moon, can you remind the class to talk about Jung typology test or humanmetrics.com or the 16personalities.com, which will identify who you are, what are your characteristics that relate to this. Just find out where we talk about it in these slides, and before the end of class, talk about that. Is that okay, Mr. Moon?
Okay.
And Thuong, you can help with that too? Great. Again, culture, the simplest definition is culture is created by values. Values are created by attitudes. Attitudes create behavior. Behavior creates culture. Any group of people that share these values, attitudes, behavior, and culture consists of a culture. Each country can have many different cultures. I think I asked Thomas this earlier, what was SRC? And SRC is that idea of your self-reliance criterion. And so the definition is here. It's an unconscious reference to your own cultural values, experience, and knowledge as a basis for decision. What are you born with? Are you born being ethnocentric? Quiz question. Or are you born being something different? You know. Do you remember? Are you born being ethnocentric? Yes or no? Take a guess.
I think instinctively or culturally, maybe. But we maybe we may have to try to think differently, I think.
Absolutely. So make sure you understand. Ethnocentrism, you know there are other cultures. Usually when you're born, you don't know of others. You start parochial with parochialism. That means you only know one way. And so one way is actually really bad. However, it's still okay sometimes In companies, you can have company management that's parochial. For example, you have a factory or a store making potatoes and you sell that to your local neighbors. You know what works in your village. You know what the other villagers in your farm area like. So your views are okay. So you do the parochial management to the parochial people in the parochial environment. You don't think about other cultures. If somebody comes in from a different area, they're just a tourist. You are only focused on the regular villagers you keep selling to. So you start parochial, you get more education, you get more awareness of other cultures, and then you become ethnocentric, and then you need to overcome your self-reliance or self-reference criterion to become successful. Culture is not right or wrong. It's not about individual behavior. It's not inherited. There's lots of things to help you identify it, like stereotypes. There's so much information about cultures. There's so much information about how to manage. You have to get a lot of research about your other company or your environment or your staff in order to manage them well, in order to be successful. So there's so much information, you start making stereotypes. But while stereotypes are good because it helps you remember lots of information together, you have to check it. Is it accurate? Make sure you learn about that. And then there's different words like socialization, acculturalization, enculturalization. The idea that acculturalization is you're learning about somebody else's culture, a new culture. Enculturalization is you're learning about your own culture. And then just learning about culture. Culture is like, who was that guy in the Titanic movie? The whole idea they get, crushed by an iceberg. Many people get crushed by the culture iceberg. Who's that guy that was in that movie with the guy and girl singing on the top of a boat?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
There we go, Leonardo DiCaprio, right. So you're doomed and you die because of this iceberg. Make sure you're aware of it. Culture is like that iceberg. You can identify some things and you might have a stereotype about those people because you see a little bit of the iceberg. But most of the culture is underground. Most of the culture is underwater. Most of the culture is not seen. You need to check. You need to reverse translate. Ask those people if that's what works. So we see this, there's several things you can see, many things you can't see. Be aware of that. So with cultural dimensions, there's many different types. Anybody know what is a dimension of culture? We can identify there's more than 200 countries in the world, which means there's at least 200 different cultures. But then there's places like India that has more than 1,000 cultures just inside the one country. So there's many cultures. How can you check for a culture? What can you look for a culture? What are the dimensions of culture? Thomas, do you have any guess? This shows culture, this shows culture, this shows culture, this shows
Well,
culture.
for example, food.
Food, okay, sure. Some people eat differently depending on where you are. Yes. What is another example of culture related
Maybe
to
how
food?
people act towards each other.
Okay, great. Yes. You guys are, Thomas, great. You're an amazing student. If you want to be an amazing executive out in world or a master's or a PhD student, you will have a lot easier time being even more successful if you're a lot more specific. So can we get more specifics? What are some more examples or more specifics? For example, here, some cultures react differently than other cultures just by looking at this. Some cultures react differently than other cultures. How? Can you guys explain what they are? How are some cultures different here?
Well, with the cereal, it was in the video, and like the professor said that for her as a Westerner, it was always really common to let her child choose the different cereal that she wanted, because she can show basically like who she is as a person. Meanwhile, for her Japanese colleague, they always prepared food themselves for the child. So in general, like the Asian culture, it is more common to prepare food for others without really asking them what they want, because we assume that we know what they want. So that is why in Asia, they also use chopsticks because like we prepare the food, or like Asian people prepare the food that they also cut it. Meanwhile, in Western countries, we do it by ourselves most of the time.
Awesome. You're such a polite international gentleman. If I was going to talk about that, I would talk about how you said the Western mother, they like to identify the child's character or culture or something beautiful like that. If I talk about it, I'd say, my mom just wanted me to be independent as soon as possible. So go off, learn how to make your own cereal so you can take care of yourself as soon as possible. And in Asia, they usually think that the child's job is just to learn and grow up. And after they finish university, after they finish learning, that's when they can get married. That's when they can get a job. That's when they start taking care of themselves. So all of the time before they go off and live on their own, the mother is supposed to take care of all of the food and the cleaning details. It's not a low level. It's focused so that the child's maximum interest, maximum energy is focused just on learning. Versus in North America, maybe the parents want the child to be able to take care of themselves as soon as possible, as much as possible. But Thomas, you had beautiful words. Great. What about this? What did you see with this? UNO or Ulugbek or Pia? What do you see here? What is an example of a cultural dimension? Remember? Or here?
Yeah, we talked about it already. It's like Westerners see the one thing more, like for example, with the guy smiling, they only focus on the one person and say that maybe he's like happy in both pictures. Whereas other people tend to focus on the whole group. So even though he's smiling in the second picture, some people might say that he's still like sad because the rest or his like environment is sad or
Right.
angry.
Awesome. And so we also talked about some cultures will look at the environment, as you just said, and say, if this balloon has been staying here for all day, but then all of a sudden it just starts going up into the air, and we just ask the question, what's happening? Why? Some people would say it's because of the environment, like the wind changed. Other people would say it's individual detail, like there's a hole in the balloon or the string was cut. It's not right or wrong. They usually just guess answers. You manage them because they see things differently. Same thing here. Some people see it based on how it is actually made. Other people see it on the actual design it's made. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just different. Did anybody understand this? Why is this different? Jung Moon, do you remember, what do you see here? See that? Ready? I'm gonna show you again for maybe 1 second. I'm gonna ask everybody in the class in 1 second, take a look at that picture and tell me what you see. Or write it down in the Zoom chat. Ready? That's it. What did you see there? Write it in the Zoom chat. Is everybody finished? Jung Moon, did you want to write down what you saw?
Face on the cake.
You saw a kid? Is that what I just heard?
A baby face on the cake.
You saw a baby face on a cake. Okay, what about you, Pia? What did you see?
For me, it looked like some sort of like product with a baby ad like on it, maybe like for Pampers or something.
Okay, usually they're good. Thank you very much for that. So in the research, when we actually do this test properly, most people in Western countries, they will just see the picture of the baby. They'll focus on the baby. They'll describe the baby. But when we ask the Asian people, they see the whole relationship. They see this is a tissue box. This is a Kleenex box. The Kleenex box is not open yet, but it's a Kleenex box with the picture of a baby and the sign of a baby, but it's a tissue box. So the Asian people will see it's a tissue container, and the Western people will see just the picture of the baby. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just people managed themselves differently. What about this? Look back. Any idea what this is about? The idea of 2 million minutes, this video?
This video shows that the study time in China, India, US are totally different.
Yes, the study times are totally different. But if, again, try to be as specific as possible. Next week, when you present your group project, be very, very specific. For example, the study time of this whole study is showing every high school student has the same number of years of study, the same number of minutes of class time, no matter where you are. It's just how each of these individual kids, students in North America, students in India, students in China, themselves spend different amounts of time doing it. I know for sure, I'm from North America. When I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, as soon as I could get out of school, I would be playing. I would be water skiing or boating or biking with friends. But in India, they do a lot more studying before school and studying after school. And in China, it's even more. So in United States, this movie talks about how United States students study on average 302,000 minutes in high school. In India, these students spend 422,000 minutes in high school. In China and Korea, they spend 583,000 minutes in high school. Anything else? Can you guys make a new management proposal about what else could be different than that? The question is, we're talking about just time, but how else? Like the time shows the cultures are different, but how else are they different? Pia, did I hear you? Yes?
Yeah, I think their goals were quite different. Like in a video, for example, the Indian students said that because they are used to, or not all of them, of course, but some of them are used to poverty. They want to achieve something in life and get a good job. And I think many of the American students said that they're not planning to work in an office, so they had like very different goals for the future.
Good. So their life goals are different, or their intensity is also different. People that are kind of poor or in developing countries, I describe it as they are hungry. They have been starving for so long, they're hungry for success. And in Korea, for example, where we are, a lot of Koreans are, especially the older people, they're very uncomfortable talking about being poor. They only want to talk about how they are successful now, even though one of the reasons why I was here is because in the 1960s and 70s, Korea had almost zero. The war destroyed everything. Families didn't even have one bowl of rice or one shoe, not even two shoes, not even one shoe. They were super poor. More than like about $100 a year is what the country was generally making on average. But people in Canada, like me, I was attracted to find out how that's different, how that's operated, how that's managed. But the Korean people, many people, they don't want to talk about it. They are only hungry to talk about the good news, the good times, the good successes. So they still may be poor and living in a tent or living in an ugly home, but they may have, very, very expensive clothes or expensive car for the other people to see. So that image is one, or that hunger for future growth is different. The Chinese students, the Indian students, they're really hungry to have a successful future, versus in North America, as we saw, they are spending much more than half of their time. You have 168 minutes every week. Maybe you're working or studying 40 minutes. Maybe you sleep 56 minutes every week. But you also have more than 70 minutes every week, 70 hours every week to be able to do something else. In China, in India, they use those extra 70 minutes to make them more competitive, to make them better, to make a better future. Versus in North America, even your core study time is focused on sports or playing or having fun or socializing. And that's not bad. It is incredibly important to socialize. But many people don't look at it like that. They just think these students are studying hard STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, math, those things. And that's why the countries are growing so fast. North America and many of those countries that are advanced, they're complacent, so they're not growing as fast. So we started talking about many vague examples. Any questions about those before we start identifying what are the research ways to identify cultural dimensions? Any questions about that or comments? What did you find interesting? I can't get people to talk to me. No comments. Okay, so let's identify, again, overall management. There's theories, there's Maslow, Herzberg, McGregor, we understand that. And we understand parochialism, and then you go to ethnocentrism and yourself. So what is culture? There's different experts identifying dimensions of culture. And so let's take a look at these. This slide here is incredibly important for you to remember for a long time. You know of Einstein, you know of maybe Maslow, but if you do want to do international business, try to be aware of what this slide is showing. Hofstede, he was just one guy that did a research project, and he identified that culture varies. One culture is different than another culture depending on power distance. And another way culture is different is how people focus on individual details versus group details. Another one is different behind their uncertainty avoidance. How much do they avoid uncertainty, or how much do they accept it? And another one is focused on career orientation or quality of life. That's related to masculinity with Hofstede. And then there's other features or dimensions like long-term orientation. But those four dimensions are very important for Hofstede. PDI, power distance; IDV, individualism; uncertainty avoidance, UAI; and the MAS, masculinity. So please be aware of that. We'll talk about that lots throughout the semester. If you have questions, speak up. Another guy, Paul. Do I follow a cultural dimension by, can you listen to me on the internet without seeing my face, without seeing my body, without seeing my clothes or my home? Can you just identify my culture, or possibly where I'm from, based on how many words I'm using? Not even listening to me, but just how many words? Yes. Some people say there's high context cultures, like in Korea, like in Japan, they use few words. Like where they say pegopa, that could mean I'm hungry, or it could mean are you hungry, or it could be a sign, let's go get something to eat. It's just one word, but it could have many meanings. And so there's a high reliance on the surroundings and the environment to have your meaning. That's the high environment context culture. The opposite is the low environment context culture, where they have low outside meaning and all words are used. I obviously am from a low context. I don't rely on the environment to communicate. I use every single word to make sure it's very clear. And I get into a lot of trouble with that. Many times when somebody from the high context culture is talking to me and they say one thing, and then I repeat it or I clarify it, it's kind of disrespecting them. So be aware, how are you going to do that? That's usually an easy one to remember, but many people switch them and they say high context means lots of words. It's the high environment context uses few words. Low context means lots of words. That was Edward T. Hall. Another researcher or research group was Clockhorn and Strodbeck. They researched the relationship to nature, relationship to people, relationship to time, human activities. Those aspects. Are people past oriented or future oriented? Be careful. A lot of people in North America say they're future oriented, and when you're talking about investing, you hear a lot of people say our long-term plans, our 20-year plans are blah blah blah. But the reality is they are generally more present oriented. They will change almost everything to make sure they satisfy the shareholders today, this present period. Versus in China, for example, the company executives are focused on making sure they're following history, what they have been doing for the last 1,000 years. They keep doing something similar. Or in Japan, that idea of continuing the same way. You don't make too many changes. That's interesting. Trampinar is another researcher. He's identified culture is different. Some ways are by universal versus particular. This again is almost the same way as other things that we've talked about. Individualism versus collectivism, and then specific versus diffuse, neutral versus effective, achievement versus ascription, time and relation to the environment. For example, what does relationship to the environment mean? How can a culture be related to the environment? What we're talking about there is some people are mastering the environment. When you build a new city in Korea or in China, a new city can be made maybe in 3 months. You could have 30-story apartment buildings built in 2 weeks. It's really surprising. But what do? They go in, they rip the mountain out. They take the environment or the nature out. They take all the trees out, build the buildings, and then they put the dirt back and make a mountain again and put the trees back on top of it. So they are mastery of the environment, versus other cultures are more subjugated to nature and the environment. Obviously, the native Indian cultures, they don't change the nature at all. They live with the nature. And increasingly in North America, you're not supposed to be killing trees or damaging trees to make new buildings. Some North American homes, you can see, they're making the home around an old tree. It's interesting to see. Schwartz, for example, is another researcher. He's talking about conservatism, autonomy, hierarchy, egalitarianism, mastery, harmony, the same type of thing I was just talking about. And then there's a big project. One of the last big ones was the GLOBE project, where many researchers came together and they identified power distance was a main dimension of culture. Uncertainty avoidance was another main one. Humane orientation, institutional collectivism, in-group collectivism, assertiveness, gender egalitarianism, and future orientation. So make sure you're aware of all of these. I'm not going to test you on these, but it would be good for you to keep checking this slide. This slide is number 35 in our week 1. So come back to this and eventually try to learn about it. Whatever project you try to develop and start introducing next week, keep this in the back of your mind. You want to develop a project related to some type of international management. Well, you should be thinking of how the company is different and consider these different ways. And so we can identify them. Hofstede, we've already talked about. Power distance is the extent to which less powerful members of organizations and institutions accept and expect that power is distributed unequally. What does that mean? When I say less powerful members of organizations, who am I talking about? Jung Ho Moon, can you tell me, what does less powerful members of organizations or society, less powerful members of society, what is
Like
that?
the workers in a low hierarchy. Maybe.
Wow, you guys are so polite. Yes, workers in an organization are less powerful. I was going to say poor people, but that's really bad. Yes, you are correct. The workers, but management may hate you. What are you talking about? The management? I'm the president. I'm working all the time. Anyway, yes, that idea of the introductory level, or the workers in the factory floor, accept the top executive has a different culture than them. They know it exists and they accept it and they expect it. So for example, if you're driving on the highway and you drive by the CEO of Samsung and he does his car makes a mistake and makes you crash, well, maybe people won't really look at him as much as just looking at taking care of you. So that high levels of society are treated differently. Collectivism, what we're talking about there is some people think about the groups. Some people think about not just the individual person. Please be careful, it's talking about the individual detail. For example, in North America, a lot of people are starting to become very litigious. They will sue people, they will attack people for one small mistake with a comma, or a spelling mistake in a sign or an advertisement, or if they haven't shoveled all of the snow off of the walkway and there's 1 centimeter of snow or water or oil on the ground, and if they fall on it, they can attack you. That individual focused detail, it's definitely focused on individual person, but it's also focused on the individual detail. Compared to in Asia, they're more focused on the group value. Like when the earthquake came and the nuclear reactor had a huge problem in Japan, what did CNN and BBC do? They were looking for what was the individual person that didn't design the nuclear power plant properly. Yes, there was a tsunami. Yes, there was this big problem that crushed it and the whole community, but let's forget about nature. Let's just find out who didn't design that thing properly. Who is the one individual person we can talk about? Versus in Japan, what did they do? They talked about how the community is suffering, how the community needs some new solution to make things better. Who can help the community? That collective idea versus individual idea. If you go in as a Western person and you start talking about how that minister of industry has the bad rules allowing nuclear power plants to be built this way, the society in Japan or China or maybe even Korea can kick you out because you're focusing not just on the answer, but you're focusing on attacking one person. And in Korea, it's so extreme that there are laws. If you say that minister designed that building that killed people, that harms his image. Whether it's true or not, you could end up going to jail for 7 years for defamation because they're so focused on creating the collective harmony in many of these countries. Next, career orientation versus relationship orientation. Hofstede doesn't use those words. Those are Canadian researchers' update. Hofstede talks about femininity versus masculinity. And it's not necessarily talking about a guy versus a girl or a vagina versus a penis. He's talking about the idea of some people are focused on relationships. Some people are focused on careers development. That masculine is that aggressive career growth despite other people around you. And other people, the feminine, is more focused on the people around you and the relationship for your career growth. So that's the same research focus, but it has different words by a Canadian person after the Hofstede said it. I believe he's a Dutch person, European person said that before. Next, uncertainty avoidance. I think that's all very clear. Many societies have a very different view to what is new. Many cultures like Korea has some of the world's highest fear of what is uncertain or what is unknown. So they have many rules and regulations to manage that. The extent to which a culture programs its members to feel either uncomfortable or comfortable in unstructured situations. And then there's other, like the long-term orientation, and there's Hofstede actually has 6 dimensions, but just these top 4 are internationally accepted. Be aware of those. This is the written out words if you want more information to see what I just said. Power distance, individualism, career orientation, or quality of life. Again, that was updated by the Canadian lady, Nancy Adler from McGill University. She wrote this book that we have. If anybody wants details to it, I've got the Dutch book, the European book, and the Canadian book. Canadian book's much better in my opinion. Next, we go on to uncertainty avoidance. We've already talked a lot about that. Long-term orientation, again, you can skip over that, but if you want, you can check into it. So far, Hofstede has not developed it very well. I would like to show this one article. It was created by Hofstede. Eventually, it would be nice for you guys to show me how you can identify culture and what is wise culture inside just one paper. So this paper was created by Hofstede to show international management. So reading it, you're going to learn about culture, but go deeper. Look at this paper. How long is it? How short is it? How was it created? Did it take many, many years to develop? versus other cultures and other people. So if we look at that, it would be incredible. I challenge you, anybody that can identify cultures of this paper, and it's very easy, just do a Google search, Asian management in the 21st century, that will come up on the Google search, and then just click on the link that this article is open. Most articles, you have to pay $50 for each good article. This one, it's free. So what he's identifying inside his research is basically he surveyed students, and some students were Chinese, and the Chinese said, this is the most important goal of business leaders in China. This is the most important goal of business leaders in India. This is the most important goal of business people in Denmark, most important goal of business people in USA, and this is the least important down here. And what is very interesting, if you check into that article and identify how that's interesting, I'll give you bonus points, but the clock is ticking. I will explain it later. So, yes, yes.
I think today we have a student wants to present. So,
Yes,
what do you think we can start Moon's presentation?
Jung Moon, you're ready to start anytime. I've talked to you before the beginning of class. Whenever you're ready, please speak up.
Oh, okay, I'm ready right now.
Okay, I will make sure you can show your slides right now. Go ahead. While you get ready, this is still quite a bit of the review. It's just showing many cultures are different. How are they different with power distance versus individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance? Thanks for sharing your details. Jung-ho, looks interesting. I haven't seen this before.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Geography of thought.
Our group had prepared short informal presentation related to cultural difference East and West. Since we already seen several examples which shows the difference between East and West through the link professor had provided us. We have found different example from the book, The Geography of Thought, written by Richard Nisbet. I have read part of this book 3 years ago, so I could bring out this example for this topic. Richard Nisbet was able to find a clue of the difference between East and West through the aquarium experiment. Everyone, please look at the pictures. I will give you 7 seconds, okay? So, this experiment is after showing aquarium photos to the people from the East and West. We will ask people to write down what they have seen from the photos. Let's ask from the people from the East first. Let me see. Ulunbek, I guess you're from the East part, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
Can you tell me what you have seen from the photos?
Oh, you mean that should I speak about that picture?
Yeah, like you can tell me whatever you saw from the photos.
I saw 3 fish and frogs.
3 fish and frog. Okay. Okay. I would. Thuong Nguyen. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. I remember there are some fish breathing and swimming in the water.
Mhm.
And there are also some plants, and the color of the water is green.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Let's ask from the Western culture. Pia, can you tell? Oh yeah, sure. Sean.
No, go ahead. Pia first.
Okay. Pia, can you?
I saw many different fish, and some were swimming to the right, and I think two of them were swimming to the right, and the others were swimming to the left, and they were also in different sizes.
I see. What about Professor Watt?
there was several small fish and several big fish. They were swimming in the opposite directions. The one big fish seemed to be breathing, having bubbles, none of the rest. There was also a small frog.
Oh, okay.
So several details, but I'm a freak.
What about Thomas? Can you tell me what you have seen?
So I've seen a ground, some kind of a plant, 3 fish, and frog that wasn't touching the ground.
Okay, frog. You mentioned about the frog. For the last, Uno, can you tell me what you have seen? Okay, maybe he's a little bit. Okay. Let me see. So Easterns are more likely to scan through the whole aquarium, how many fishes are there, and the number of seagrass for everything. Meanwhile, Westerns are more likely to pick out one object's characteristics. This resulted not of everyone, but majority of the people have shown this differences from the actual experiment. After technology called eye tracker, which can follow where people are looking at, this experiment was done again, and Eastern pupils were moving very fast to scan through the whole photos, while Westerns were focused on certain objects. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. I hope more people can do things like that. You did very, very well, Jungho. You did much more than I expected, so great. Everybody else, please make sure you continue to make your presentations during the week, but also just comment and talk more. Please help me shut up. Right, Pia? So we have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to go through some of these details again pretty quickly. Generally, what I'm going to be showing you is the idea of what are some cultural mistakes and how can you deal with these as we're going forward. So we identified cultures, here's cultural differences, this type of thing. You can see my screen now. This idea of the top right, you see a dead person in the white bag. In North America, that's called a body bag. But I understand in Germany, they call this body bag just a knapsack, a backpack. So be aware when you're managing differently, even the words change. Body bag in Germany is a backpack versus a dead person bag. And in naming and marketing and food laws in North America and Europe, there is a North American product called Gerber. It's making baby food. Well, this baby food, it shows what you can see here. This vegetable turkey dinner, it's chopped up inside, so North Americans understand it. Gerber is the baby food maker, but this French word for Gerber has an association with vomiting, getting sick. That's one thing. What is another thing? In some parts of Africa, there are laws because so many people are illiterate, they might not know how to read. They have to put a photo of what is inside the container outside. So what is the photo they have? They have a photo of a baby. And so in some parts of Africa, they think a baby is chopped up inside this bottle. Be aware of those cultural differences. Same thing, this water pick in Denmark, the idea of pick is related to male genitals and water is equivalent to van. So water pick is the term for a morning erection. You might want to be aware of that. Similar to Pepsi. I remember when Pepsi came out in India, they were trying to promote it a lot. And so they were promoting themselves during a big soccer football event. And everybody thought it was great. The winning team was trying to get young kids, poor kids involved. So the winning team offered a chance for young kids to bring a Pepsi or a drink out to the players when they were having the breaks. However, The North American identified that these big, famous, rich cricket stars or sports stars, football stars, they were using kids and child labor to work for them. So what the Indians thought was good and everybody was happy with, BBC and CNN identified these are legal problems. Be aware of that. Same thing for Starbucks. I understand the German word for break is similar to destroy, and latte is related to erection. So a morning latte is waking up in the morning with an erection, or a morning latte break is destroying that election. Not election. In Canada, we have the election coming up, but breaking, destroying your sex tool. Be aware there's many big cultural differences. More cultural differences. For example, Parker Pen company in Latin America, they identified use Parker Pen, avoid embarrassment. And simple translations in other places, they said use Parker Pen, avoid pregnancy. So culture is very different for sure. Make sure you are aware of how culture is different. Pepsi in Germany, there's many different examples. Salem, cigarettes in Japan, the idea of Salem feeling free is the intended idea, but the translation says smoking the Salem cigarettes makes your mind feel free and empty. Basically, it means smoke these cigarettes, become stupid. Be aware of how the culture varies, how the culture and the language changes depending on where you are. More example, there's many examples like this. In Japan and Korea, there are popular expressions saying like the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. The underlying value is everybody is supposed to be the same. In Korea and Japan, it's saying that don't be different. In North America, they have similar things, but they're saying like the squeaky wheel gets the grease. What that means is usually a car, for example, has 4 wheels, and if one wheel is starting to squeak, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. That means the person that does more, the person that talks more, the person that stands out gets the benefit. So be aware of these type of details and understand that what you think is normal could have a very big cultural mistake. In Korea, a tiger dies, leaving its leather. A man dies, leaving his name. Be aware of your honor. Things like that. Necessity in the United States is the mother of invention. It means you should be resourceful. Versus in many places in Asia, you're supposed to only follow exactly what your boss says. There's many examples like this, many cultural examples. Like a scheme in the United States is a bad plan, versus in British English, it means generally a plan, a good idea. Or being sharp. In North America, to me, if somebody says, I'm a sharp guy, that's a compliment. He means my mind is sharp, my mind is quick, my mind is very good and accurate and able. But in British English, sharp generally means conniving or unethical, like a cheater. Be aware of those differences. So there's many different definitions of culture, many different aspects to that. We've talked a lot about, and we're going to continue talking a lot about Hofstede, this well-known Dutch organizational anthropologist. He views culture as a collective mental programming of people and the software of the mind. It's how we think and reason. Be aware of how these work, and there's many examples. There's national culture, there's professional culture, there's language, different cultures, there's verbal and non-verbal, unspoken facial expressions versus gestures. There's nearly 7,000 active languages in the world, including more than 2,000 different languages in Africa and another 2,000 different languages, much more than 2,000 different languages in Asia, because India has more than 1,000 just on its own. Be aware of that. Which language is the most important? Do we go through Mandarin? For example, some people say there's close to 1 billion people just having native Mandarin speakers. For the Chinese, don't forget that Mandarin Chinese is different than the other types of Chinese. There's the simple Chinese, different. And then there's the Hindi, 365 million speakers for that. Different than Bengali, different than the other languages within India. English just has 341 million native speakers in, naturally, United States, Canada, United Kingdom. Then there's several different languages, but what is the most important language? It's none of these. The most important language is the language of your customer. So we've reviewed many aspects. We've already started talking about the 2 million minutes videos, the East-West documentaries, which show different examples. We've talked lots about Maslow, Herzberg, McGregor. Remember those details. Also remember the fact that some people say United States is the best. They grew, they were the most powerful for so long. Well, look at the bigger picture. For example, how long did it take for them to go from a farming culture to the industrial culture? Well, India started first, and then they ended up industrial before, England became industrial before places like India, so they dominated these other cultures. And then United States started agrarian or farming, and they became industrial by copying England, and it took them 100 years to develop. Japan developed afterwards, learning from England, and then also learning from USA, and they took 70 years. Korea learned from England and learned from USA and learned from Japan, and Korea developed in 25 years. Well, currently, China is developing super fast, but we have to give special attention to China because there's 1.4 billion people. It's very hard to change. Vietnam, for example, they also have about 100 million people, but some people say Vietnam is going to develop from a developing country to an advanced country within maybe less than 10 years by copying England, United States, Japan, and Korea. Be aware of those different details. The book that we have, the idea of the book, it's talking about, if I just show it to you, again, the Asian management systems. This book talks in the first and second chapters, a large part about how Eastern cultures are different than West. And they say it's related to Max Weber. All of you as business students, you should be aware of Max Weber. You should be aware of Karl Marx. Those guys are super big, super famous. But I would like to point out that these ideas may be different. Let's take a look at what he says. This book, this paper that they created, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. So Max Weber, together with these two other guys, they're the principal architect of modern social science. They were focused on rationalization, secularization, and disenchantment, blah, blah, blah. They were also focused on the rise of capitalism and modernity. Now we're getting important. Weber was thinking the most important thing was the difference among societies is not how people produce things, but how people think about things. I agree. However, Weber's thesis combines the economic sociology and the sociology of religion. He created this book, which was talking about religion and the spirit of capitalism, which so far it sounds okay, but if you check in detail, what he's saying is different than Karl Marx's historical materialism. Weber emphasized the importance of cultural influences embedded in religion. That is the means for understanding capitalism. Weber's broader investigations shows that the religions of India, the religions of China, those are the reasons for non-development of capitalism in those societies. Well, currently in 2021 and 2022, we can't say that capitalism is not developing in China, not developing in Vietnam, that those countries are developing faster than what Weber said was the developed world. So you guys should start to identify how Weber is wrong now, or he's out of date now. Maybe you become super, super famous talking about it. So what did Weber say? Ultimately, he's saying that Confucianism ethic talks about and promotes how people accept and adjust to their environment. So the thesis became key in East Asian nations in the 1970s. East Asia, East Asia. So Confucians basically adjust to your environment. The next one, the Protestant ethic, this is talking about the different thing. This is talking about the Western view. He's saying, I am one before God. And so I do anything as I see right or as I see fit. So Western people are more Protestant focused versus the Confucian people. The Eastern people are more group focused. So that is a special thing. The Protestant ethic, I'm one before God. The Confucian ethic, you're supposed to be working with your hierarchy, with your group communities. And now we have a bunch of fun things to think about. Class is almost finished. Just take a look at how Western people see almost everybody. Your manager, the boss, is almost the same as anybody else, just a little bit taller, a little bit bigger. Versus in Asia, the boss is huge. What about your contacts? In the West, you have a few contacts here, a few contacts here. They're all different. They're all separate. It is good to know all of them, but they're all separate, different little groups. Versus in Asia, it's very complicated. Almost everybody is connected. And so if we talk about the grapevine, we identify almost everything gets passed around. What about for old people? The seniors' daily life. In Western areas, the old people are independent and the kids are independent from the old people, and you just walk a dog or play golf. But in Asia, the older people are taking care of the kids. You're still part of the active family. In West, the children are just one part surrounded by the husband, the mom, and the dad. The older people are separate. Versus in Asia, everybody is focused on the child. Everybody is working together. What about the weekend? In the West, you have your own pool party or your own barbecue. You stay separate and alone during the weekend. Versus in Asia, everybody's in some ways all together. Then there's the eating culture, the drinking culture. The idea of when you're angry in the West, you show you're angry, you say something. Versus if somebody's angry or not happy in the East, you still have to put on a smile to keep the group happy. If you are angry, one of the only ways to deal with it is to take that one person you're angry with out and get drunk together. And when you are drunk, then you say something because you have the excuse that you can say that you were drunk and out of control, sorry, forgive me, and we pretend it never happened the next day. The idea of I am all by myself in Western country versus I am just part of a group, or ways to negotiate, ways for problems. In the West, you go straight through the problem. If you have a problem, you talk about it. In Asia, if you have a problem, you avoid it. You don't talk about it. You just try to move on. There's many different examples like that. Some people are talking about the standard of beauty. Western people like to have darker skin. Asian people like to have whiter skin, sometimes in general. And then there's the idea of we live in a multicultural world where there's different cultures. It goes above countries. It goes above geographies. It goes above race. It goes above specific groups. There exists worldwide and in some form, usually mixed. Most people are usually ethnocentric or parochial. They don't understand why people do things differently. Look back, the idea of culture started with the Renaissance. Some people say 14th, 17th century, scientific revolution, the American Revolution, Age of Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution, modern civilization. There's many things that we can look at here for culture. You guys can go through these details on your own. We talked about the student's assignment already, how it's best if you follow the respected formats and try to go beyond the class to interact with your local employers or potential future employers. Start developing relationships as soon as possible. Develop your dreams and your goals. Please talk to us about that. I will have the Zoom session open every Wednesday at lunchtime for anybody to come talk to me about class, about your studies, about university, and especially about your goals and dreams or your personal things that you're dealing with. One of the things I was telling you guys to talk to me about, now that we're basically finished class, you should have many different references, expensive details that you can share with a company. But let's take a look at how this is done. I started earlier in class saying Asian management in the 21st century. It's very special. Why? Because he basically just made an 8.5-page paper. It's very short, plus references, and he only referenced basically 2 books. This information here is one reference related to a Chinese book. Here is the reference to a Russian book, how they talk about management. And then he surveyed something like 25 different people, 5 people from China, 5 people India, Denmark, USA, and take a look at the details. In USA, personal wealth is almost the top, but it's the bottom in Denmark and in China. So personal wealth is very important in India and in USA, but it's bad in Denmark and in China. Be aware of that. Or the other last thing I want to point out is when you are managing yourself, look at the very big picture. When you write a story, when you write a book, you become famous because people know about you. However, in science, it's the same way. They also look at your references. Well, in this paper, it was written by Hofstede. How many times did Hofstede reference himself? He referenced himself more than 10 times in his own paper. So anything he does is making him more famous. And he submitted it to the Asian Pacific Journal of Management. He referenced that journal many, many times, so that encourages the journal to accept him. There's a lot of details there. I don't expect you to know all of it. Start with the idea of just get one good journal that you like and develop it for your own specialization. Next week, we're going to be talking about the art of war and 13 different principles and how it was written on small little chopsticks, what it is. At the same time, understand that some of what you may know, like Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, they say that's the first part, but what about China's ships? Much, much, much bigger than Christopher Columbus's ships. They were in the same area 70 years before Christopher Columbus. Why don't they promote themselves? It's part of their culture. They're not supposed to brag. They're not supposed to do that. But if you go through North America, you can see some old Chinese remains from before Christopher Columbus was even there. So last, this is your culture. Hofstede is good to know, but know yourself first. Jung typology test, humanmetrics.com. Go through this. Look at the big picture. Look at what big companies are doing. Start practicing this stuff. Develop yourself with technology. We're finished. If you guys have any other questions, let me know. I believe that's the end of class. Thanks, everybody.